Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, Dogecoin. The crypto craze is taken over and prices are reflecting that. But not everything is perfectly rosy in the world of Bitcoin. And one major hesitation for me is the carbon footprint or energy demand of these cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin specifically. So I want to take a deeper dive into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general and explore more about the environmental footprint of this new digital economy. Hey guys, welcome to Saving Green. My name is Josh, where we crunch the numbers and look at the science to make informed decisions to help your wallet and the planet at the same time. So before we get in too deep into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, I just wanted to talk about a quick disclaimer. I am not a computer scientist. I am not a Bitcoin expert by any means, nor am I a financial advisor. I'm just someone who's looking into this for my own personal investments and wanted to kind of weigh the pros and cons about blockchains in general. So here goes my attempt at explaining Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin? Okay, so Bitcoin is one type, the oldest type of digital cryptocurrency. It is a decentralized, transmissible, and transparent way of quantifying assets that is completely independent of any country or bank or credit card company, as it really exists on its own network that is independently verified by other users on the network. So in that respect, it's completely globally accessible and not tied to any one national currency or fiat currency like the US dollar, nor is it linked to any commodity like gold. It kind of stands in its own universe. Now there are a fixed amount of Bitcoins that will ever become available, and that number is capped at 21 million. And that's set by the algorithm that develops Bitcoins, which was created in 2009 by someone named Satoshi. We don't really know who or what he or she is, but nonetheless, that's the upper limit. And about 19 million Bitcoins to date have been mined. And mining is the process of verifying other Bitcoin transactions, of which the verifier is rewarded with Bitcoin. And that's how new Bitcoins enter the market. Now, the underlying principle of cryptocurrency like Bitcoin is the blockchain, or a series of individually verified transactions that are collectively documented on a single ledger or tabulation. And keeping only one ledger at a time maintains the integrity and security of the system and currency. What needs to happen is that when a seller wants to get rid of Bitcoin to a buyer, the system needs to validate that this process is kosher. So what happens is the seller has their own digital wallet or signature, which is generally private, and the buyer has a public network address. So both numbers are verified and time-stamped to ensure that the seller has enough coin to complete the transaction. So once enough transactions occur to equal the amount of 1 megabyte, the system collects all that data into one block, and that block is run through the special algorithm for Bitcoin for verification. That algorithm is called the SHA-256, or Special Hash Algorithm, or 256 bits. Now, other currencies have their own algorithms. At this point, the network of individual computer systems is off to the races to validate that specific block of data. This is done by determining a special key or nonce, or number only used once, which when plugged into the hash algorithm creates the correct output function. It's almost like a CAPTCHA for online purchases to ensure that only one block is verified at a given time. For every dataset, there is only one hash target, or 256-bit number, which is almost impossible to generate. So the algorithm generates a hash function, and the miners throw in a bunch of different nonce values in hopes to guess the right hash output, which has to be close, but not exact. Now, the difficulty of each hash algorithm is dependent on the number of users in the network, and that's determined by the number of zeros that precede the hash target. So since the frequency of block verification is capped at about one block every 10 minutes, the complexity increases of these hash functions based on the number of users on the system. Now, once the correct solution is found, the solver announces to the network that the hash function has been solved, and other users can quickly verify their function by plugging in the nonce value and determining if that is indeed correct. Now, verification requires very little computational power and is done pretty quickly. Now, once verified, that block has been added to the previous string of transactions, and thus a new link in the chain of blocks or blockchain has been finalized. Once complete, this new blockchain is locked, encrypted, and tagged for the next block to be added. While rare, if two miners happen to find the correct solution simultaneously, then the miner who has produced the most work or has the most seniority is deemed the winner, and the loser block is removed from the chain. Now, the first one to correctly guess the hash function correctly is rewarded for their efforts with a number of bitcoins and a transaction fee. Today, the number of bitcoins awarded is 6.25 bitcoins for every approved block. Now, this number halves every 4 years, and that means that the last block will eventually be mined in about 120 years or so. Now, this whole system is grounded on the premise that the fastest and most powerful computers have done the most work by guessing the most numbers to solve each hash function. Therefore, the proof is in their work. So, by default, this means that there are barriers to entry based on computational and computer demands. Now, this means that the chances of success are ultimately random, but are tipped in favor of those computer systems that can run the most hash algorithms per second, which is called their hash rate. Now, if you wanted to game the system, theoretically you would need 51% of all the computational power to approve false blocks, whether to inflate the number of Bitcoin available or to distribute extra Bitcoin where none exists. Now, as more miners enter the network, this becomes increasingly impossible, as the accumulation of data and computational power ensures blockchain transparency and security, since the blockchain itself increases complexity every day. So what's the problem here? Well, the problem of proof of work is that it requires a lot of redundant computational effort to solve these puzzles. This racetrack analogy is the reason why energy demand is so high. In fact, in some ways, that's the goal and driving principle of Bitcoin, because the more challenging it is to approve a transaction, the more secure and trusted the network becomes. So how much energy are we talking here? Well, since Bitcoin's founding in 2009, the rate of hash complexity has increased a mere 13 trillion times. And to compete, individual computer systems are no longer keeping up. So they're forming networks or hives or pools of computational power, specifically called ASICs, or application-specific integrated circuits, which are basically dedicated servers just designed to generate nonce numbers and guess these hash functions. And some of these can cost thousands of dollars and demand tons of electricity. Now, here's a list of some mining hardware examples if you were curious from Wikipedia. Now, let's say you wanted to start mining and you were curious how much money you could generate every day and what your power use would be. Well, this handy online calculator gives you a general answer based on your computational power, energy usage, energy price, and Bitcoin price. For example, if I wanted to get this cheap and relatively efficient ASIC system, the Antminer U3 that only uses 63 watts at a given time, even at $32,000 a coin, I'm still losing $61 a year. Now let's say I upgrade to this more expensive Avalon A21 system, which consumes 1200 watts. If that's run 24 hours a day at 28.8 kilowatt hours per day, I'm still losing money unless I cut my utility rate in half. In fact, my total energy consumption for my home personally would increase about 50% if I were to buy this system. Now, the exact number of watt hours used for Bitcoin mining globally is difficult to assess completely, and there are a few online references that do shed some light on this specific topic. One is the Digiconomist, which has a wealth of data comparing energy consumption and comparisons to national energy expenditures. As we see from this graph, current Bitcoin mining energy usage at about 77 terawatt hours is comparable to that of New Zealand, a little bit more than that of the Czech Republic, but a little under 2% of US domestic energy demand. Now, since the energy demands are so high and require such a steady supply of power, renewables like wind and solar may not be viable options for many miners. Now, there are some areas geographically, like Sichuan province in China, where almost 90% of their energy consumption comes from renewables, but this is not universal and certainly not the standard. In fact, coal, unfortunately, is still the driving force behind much of Bitcoin today. What's particularly concerning is the cost of each Bitcoin transaction, which is orders of magnitude more expensive from an energy standpoint than a typical Visa transaction, for example. And yes, it does have its security, but the cost benefit is certainly something to consider, especially for those who are looking to enter Bitcoin as a payer or payee and looking towards it as a fungible currency. Overall, it's undeniable that the energy demands of Bitcoin are exceedingly high and rising every day. There are other cryptocurrencies that use different algorithms that may be more or less efficient, and we'll talk about those in other videos. Now, proponents will argue that while energy demand is high, it still pales in comparison to that of the banking industry. And some will say that switching to blockchain will actually save energy overall, since no one's going to be entering banks or turning on the air conditioning or running ATMs. In fact, an article from Medium.com states that the global energy demand of the banking sector is about 140 terawatt hours, which back in 2018 dwarfs the 32 terawatt hours that Bitcoin used at the time. But if we scale to today, that Bitcoin mining number jumps to about 77 terawatt hours according to Digital Economist, and can be as high as 107 per Cambridge University's CBEI index. So we see that a 2 to 3-fold increase in energy consumption in the last couple of years is definitely a troubling trend. So I hope that this sheds some light onto the complexities of how Bitcoin is mined and verified and the energy implications of this particular system. Ultimately, do your research and determine for yourself whether this is an investment that makes sense for you financially and environmentally. And please comment below with any corrections or comments, as I'm eager to learn more about this topic. I will link down to a few of my resources and references so you can learn more about blockchain and Bitcoin specifically. And as always, be cautious with new technology, and it's important to consider the implications of any investment. So hit that like button if you found this helpful so the YouTube algorithm can help Saving Green reach more people. And thank you so much again for your time, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks.